Hello everyone, welcome to Ethics Inc. Now, today we are going to discuss the relevance of ethical approaches to the current affair. Let's choose one of the most important current event that is happening around us and affecting all of us. This corona pandemic has confronted the humanity with unique set of challenges. All nations and societies have tried to cope up with these challenges in multiple ways. What are those ways? So, declaring and enforcing lockdowns, regulating certain activities like transportation, then healthcare services, supply of essential commodities, and other activities. Especially closing timings of commercial enterprises, then organizations where people work, how many people should work, and so on. Now, if you look at these policy decisions taken by government and the responses given by people to these policy decisions, what you find that there is an underlying notion of what is right and wrong. And when you talk about what is right and wrong, you enter into the territory of ethics. So ethics helps you to systematically decide what is right and wrong and how to decide it. Now, as far as this corona pandemic is concerned, let's try to make sense of what are different moral philosophical approaches which have influenced our decisions, or are there any such understanding behind such decision. So what are the different moral philosophical approaches, ethical approaches that we should discuss now? Okay, let's begin with first approach, utilitarian approach. This approach is the outcome of theories put forward by English philosophers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. Jeremy Bentham was not only English philosopher, he was also a social reformer and a jurist. John Stuart Mill was not only English philosopher, he was a civil servant as well as a political economist. And those who have, pol science as their optional know very well about John Stuart Mill. Now, those who advocate this approach, what they say, they emphasize on one dominant principle, that greatest happiness of greatest number of people. But when we try to advocate this principle, what happens inadvertently or unintentionally, that we might sometimes end up hurting the interest of minority. So what could be example of this approach as far as corona pandemic is concerned? For example, you might have come across people who are saying that we should not enforce lockdown because it hurts economic interest of a society as a whole, because we want to save lives of few vulnerable people. So those who are indirectly talking about, against the lockdown, they are taking utilitarian stand. So this was in brief about utilitarian approach. Now there is another approach known as libertarian approach. Now this approach is known, the founding father of this approach is John Locke. He was an English philosopher and a physician and one of the most influential Enlightenment thinker. So what this approach emphasizes on? This approach emphasizes on personal autonomy and civil liberties. So by corollary, it means there should be the state intervention, but as minimum as possible. This corona pandemic has expanded the state powers enormously. So state has come into each and every phase of our life because of this pandemic. So what are those? So what we can purchase, where we can go, to whom we can meet, how many people can come together, like say for marriage function, for meeting each other, all these powers have given to the state by the people. Why? Because people have willingly accepted it and they think that these powers given to state are their own best interest. But there are some people who think these powers given to states have not served the purpose. Corona has already expanded, people's lives have already been lost. So what is the use of exercising this power? So this libertarian approach helps to overcome an ethical dilemma where we need to curb personal autonomy on one hand. We need there is a possibility of losing certain lives if we do not curb personal autonomy. So that is in short about libertarian approach. Then there is next approach known as communitarian approach. Now, this communitarian approach is based on the idea that a man is born into the society. The man derives one's identity from the society, and therefore her rights are not more important than the community welfare. The traces of this approach can be traced back to ancient Greeks. But in modern time, philosophers like Michael Sandel advocate this approach. According to Michael Sandel, justice is based in the common good or idea of common good. And what is common good? Common good is nothing but how we live together as a part of community, how we interact with each other, how we sacrifice for each other, how we share our burdens and benefit, how we strive for ethical ideals together. Now, if you want to search for examples of communitarian approach, remember certain examples where people went to balconies and windows and cheered up the workers of their nation's healthcare services by lighting lamp, by clapping hands, by beating plates. All these examples, point towards communitarian approach. Another example could be where people, emphasized on patriotic duties of elderlies to sacrifice themselves for the larger good of their nation and the future of their grandchildren. So they are indirectly advocating communitarian approach. Okay, another extreme example of this approach is in China, they strictly enforced quarantine measures, lockdown measures, so that entire society will be protected, entire community will be protected. So community's welfare at the stake are more important than individual rights. Okay, so individuals' rights are not given more importance than the community welfare. So that is in short communitarian approach. Now last approach, that is known as Rollshin approach. This approach is known after a Harvard philosopher John Rawls. John Rawls' theory of justice offers a clearest intellectual justification for center-left economies. While giving his theory of justice, John Rawls said, a just social system can be designed from behind the veil of ignorance. What does it mean? From behind the veil of ignorance means we can design a just system if we don't know who we are going to be when systems comes into existence. And what will happen if we design such a system? John Rawls says we will take care of the needs of those people whose basic minimum needs are not met or whose least well off has not happened. Now, what are the examples of Rollshin approach? Especially in India, you will find Rollshin approach dominates the other approach. For example, say government has provided food subsidy or food supply to the migrants who are returning to the native places at free of cost, or free transportation facilities for migrants who want to return to their native places. Or in certain states, governments have put cap on the hospital charges charged on COVID-19 patients. Or what could be another example? Say langar services offered by the society, or say moratorium on loan EMI by the government to help those who have become unemployed or who are facing cuts in salaries. Or what could be other examples? Say at local level, certain district collectors or municipal commissioners have warned against coercive tactics employed to seek rents from those who are living on rent basis. So these are examples where they point out that how the care of the needs of weaker sections are being taken. So they are indirectly advocating the Rollshin approach. Now, why we have advocated Rollshin approach? It is because had we followed other approaches, our healthcare system or our social infrastructure do not have adequate capacity to handle the consequences that might have followed while following other approaches. So what could be those consequences? Say sudden surge in, corona patients, sudden surge in requirements of medicine, sudden surge in requirement of ventilators and so on. So because we lack that capacity, we thought it is prudent to follow Rollshin approach and helps those who are in need, particularly from weaker sections. Now, what is the relevance of all these examples? Whenever in exam, you will be confronted with such questions which are pointing towards past actions taken by government and justification for these actions. You must be aware of what are the moral philosophical approaches behind these actions. If you are aware, you will be in better position to give better justification than the others. So thank you so much for today's ethics session.
Subscribe the Unique Academy's YouTube channel and press the bell icon for latest updates and videos.